All right, and we are live. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. If you were here yesterday, you know the drill. It's going to take a few seconds to set everything up and pass on the link so everyone else can watch as well. Brilliant. All right, I think we are all here. All right, I've got the chat and we are ready to go. All right, that all looks good. Brilliant. Cool. So welcome everyone to the second YA Book Prize panel of the week. Really excited to have you all here. Today's theme is the big issues, but I'll do some housekeeping and intros first. The big issues is about books that tap into important, thought-provoking topics of today. I am Sanne from the YouTube channel Booksandquills. I'm going to be hosting the chat today. I'm really excited to be here. Quick intro for the YA Book Prize in case anyone's watching who is unfamiliar. It is the 6th time that the YA Book Prize is happening, and it is a prize that celebrates amazing books for teens and young adults, as the title explains. We're doing these live shows in the lead up to the announcement of the winner of the YA Book Prize this year. We're doing 3 panels. We have another one coming up tomorrow. There's 10 amazing books and amazing authors on the shortlist, and today I'll be talking to 4 of them. You can already see them here, and then I'll be asking them to introduce themselves in a few seconds. Before we get started, some quick housekeeping. Okay, so you can ask questions in the chat. I'll be looking at the chat as well. We've also asked you to send in questions on Twitter. I have a bunch of those here. Of course, I've written some questions, so we'll be going through all of those. Quick hello to everyone that's just joined in. Okay, so I think we are ready to do author introductions, and I would love for Lauren to start, please.
Hello, I'm Lauren James, the author of The Quiet at the End of the World. So I write science fiction young adult novels. I also write The Loneliest Girl in the Universe and the Next Together series. And I'm so excited to be on this shortlist with some amazing authors. So The Quiet at the End of the World is about human extinction and what is going to happen if the human race evolves beyond our current form. So it's about the youngest 2 people born after humans go sterile from a virus pandemic that spreads across the planet, and it's about them growing up knowing that everyone around them is going to die and they're going to be left all on their own. So I wrote this before coronavirus, and I was not expecting my book to come true. I wrote a lot of social media posts about what it might be like to have a virus spreading across the planet and like bonding with each other from quarantine online, and it's really scary seeing that happen in the world. But it's a more optimistic book than it might sound from the description. It's kind of a feel-good post-apocalyptic novel, quite a comforting read about the goodness of humanity even in the worst of circumstances, and how we should all come together and look after each other, basically.
That's a great intro. Thank you, Lauren. All right, Jenny, you're up next.
Hi, I'm Jenny. This is my book, which is not neatly on the bookshelf, so I'll point it at you. So Furious Thing is the story of 15-year-old Lexi. She lives with her mum and her 6-year-old stepsister and her soon-to-be stepfather, John. And the book starts when there's going to be a wedding. Her mum and her soon-to-be stepfather are about to get married, and she really wants to belong to this family. She feels that they are academic and popular and have so much more than she does, and she doesn't fit in. She keeps losing her temper, and she doesn't know why. She doesn't understand. And it's a book that seeks to answer the question, what if I'm not the monster here? Because she begins to realize slowly that there's someone else in her family who is emotionally abusive. And I wanted to look at female rage and societal expectations of how girls and women behave, and also about controlling and coercive behavior. And it's also a love story. That's pretty much sums it up.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. All right, Malorie.
Hi, I'm Malorie. I'm shortlisted for the YA Book Prize for my book Quickfire, which is the 5th in Noughts and Crosses series. And the premise of Noughts and Crosses, for those who don't know, is It's a society's kind of split into groups, and I'm talking about the noughts and the crosses. And noughts, who are sort of treated as second-class citizens, are white people, and crosses, who kind of consider themselves closer to God in every way, are black people. And as I said, this is the 5th in the series, and this kind of it started with Callum and Seffi. Callum is a nought and Seffi is a cross. And this book it kind of follows their daughter's journey as an adult. And also Seffi has another son called Troy. And it's basically kind of like an older generation and the 3rd generation of noughts and crosses presented in this book, but with a kind of complete story going on. But I say complete story, you can read it without reading the others, but it kind of, there's going to be one last one in the series called Endgame, and then that will be it. But that's Crossfire in a sort of semi-nutshell.
There's a lot to go through. All right, thank you. Juno.
Hi, I'm Juno Dawson. I'm shortlisted for my novel Meat Market, which doesn't look very good with the sunlight shining straight on the hologram. It's about a young girl from Southeast London who is scouted by a modelling agency one day when she's at Thorpe Park, which is a theme park, and you kind of initially think it's going to be like a rags to riches tale about a girl off an estate who does well for herself. But then just as she's at the height of she's about to break through as a big model, she's sexually assaulted by a really powerful figure in the fashion industry. And she is left with a dilemma about whether or not to speak out when her whole career is on the line. And so it's about that choice that I know obviously a lot of young women have had to make, unfortunately.
Thank you very much. Okay, so I'm going to quickly say hi to everyone in the chat that has joined since we started. So hi, everyone. Please let us know where you are watching from. That's always fun to know. And we'd also love to know what you're reading at the moment, especially if it's one of the books from the shortlist. So today's topic is the big issues, important topics, and that is something that all of these books tackle. So my first question is for all of you. And it is, what are the challenges of writing a book that covers such big topics? It'll be different for all of you, of course, but what did you feel were the biggest challenges as you were writing? And Jenny, I'm going to ask you first.
For me, controlling coercive behavior is a really slippery thing. It's really hard to see in your own life, almost impossible to see in other people's lives. It's all around us. And to try and name it when lots of people say, what exactly is it in everyday life? And to try and show it through the eyes of somebody who is powerless, who isn't eloquent, who doesn't understand it herself, who when she speaks about it, doesn't really have the words. And when she does begin to have the words, people don't believe her. That for me was a real challenge. I mean, it was kind of a thrilling challenge because it felt like it sort of mirrored how it is in everyday life, that you know, even when I was writing the book and showing people initial chapters, they were like, well, what exactly is the thing that's wrong here? And because if there isn't a bruise, I think it's really, really hard to explain what controlling and coercive behavior is. And so for me, the challenge was to get it across when the protagonist doesn't even know it's happening to her. And so I tried to pull the reader in so that they too, hopefully by the end of the book, think, oh, I see it now. So hopefully you feel pulled in to it as well and experience it along with the protagonist as well. But that was the main challenge.
What did you find was kind of the best solution to that challenge? Like, how did you tackle it specifically?
I think because Lexi doesn't understand what it is, the reader can journey along with her. So when she says, I think something's happening to me and I don't know what it is, there are some times when the reader gets it before she does. There's sometimes she gets it first, and there's sometimes that you get it with her. And so I think by using those different kind of lenses, it helped to make it more complex and hopefully a deeper experience.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you. All right, Juno, how did you, what were like the biggest challenges for you with the topic that you were talking about?
I think initially there was a period quite early on in the book where I wondered if I'd bitten off more than I could chew. And I did even go to my editor and say, look, I want to do something else. And then I realized that I do not have to solve either every issue within the fashion industry. and I cannot eradicate sexual assault with one novel. I am but one voice. But I realized that all this book had to be was one voice, because it's a novel. I'm not a politician. So I went back to the beginning, and I focused in on just Yana. And this is not a book about sexual assault. This is a book about Yana Novak. She's one girl, she's 17 years old, she lives in Battersea. And then by just focusing in on her and her journey through this terrible thing, I found that I was able to do that. I was able to tell her story and hope that other people might be able to take something from the strength that she exhibits.
Yeah, so such a big topic, so you decided to kind of narrow it in on one person.
Yeah, I can't fix the fashion industry. I'm not powerful enough, and nor can I stop predatory men from preying on teenage girls. But what I can do is I could tell just Yana's story and try to understand. I've never been a fashion model, but I've been in some dodgy situations, and I think a lot of people have been in some dodgy situations. So I was able to sort of extrapolate how I felt in those situations. But then the other part of my job is to imagine what it might be like to be someone who is not a 38-year-old writer in Brighton. So the fictional side of this story was imagining what it's like to be a 5'11", 17-year-old supermodel, which I've never achieved and I never will achieve. But some of the stuff I was able to draw on my own experience.
Thank you. Malorie, what did you find was the biggest challenge for you?
I think it was kind of similar to Juno when she was talking about kind of just focusing in on the character's journey, because my book is a kind of book about we've got one character who wants to become the prime minister of the country, and he's going to be the first Naught prime minister, and it's kind of like, so a lot of it is about ambition and the people he steps over to get there, but it's also what's going on with his daughter and her friend, and so it was kind of just focusing in on each character's through line and kind of putting in what served that. So actually the challenge was all the stuff I had to take out, or all the stuff I wanted to put, I could have put in, but it didn't serve the story. So I had to kind of, my first pass was just chuck everything at it, and then it was kind of whittling it away and kind of just being very focused on each character's journey, because Crossfire covers the journeys of 4 people, 4 adults and 4 teens, and sorry, it's 2 adults and 2 teens, can't count now, but yeah, so 2 adults and 2 teens. But it is about, for me, it was about making sure I had a very clear line as to who each of them were and what their journey was going to be throughout the story. And that was a major challenge, to kind of just keep a grip on that material.
Yeah, so focusing not on one person, but on all the different characters and what their story was.
Absolutely. And then also kind of just making sure I didn't put anything in for the sake of it, just kind of, it had to serve the story.
Yeah, thank you. Lauren, how about you? What's your biggest challenge?
So I gave myself a pretty big topic as well, of the extinction of the whole human race, and it was really intimidating at first. And I had to do something similar, where I thought about, like, from a personal perspective of what is that going to be like for one teenager if you know that you're the last person. How can you even exist? Like, what's the purpose of your being alive? And is there any point in studying if you know there's going to be no future? And when I brought it back down to that level, it kind of felt a bit more manageable. I did do a lot of research, both like scientific research into the role of evolution in extinction, and kind of how we think about extinction as a thing that is happening around the world to many species right now, but also in terms of archaeology, so what humans are leaving behind on the planet, and if we disappeared right now, what is going to be here that is left of us in 1 million years, and who might find that one day. So whether that's a sentient creature on Earth that's kind of evolved, like a crow or an octopus or something, or some kind of alien that's come to the planet. And I started thinking about what I would do at the end of the world. Like, I'd want to leave something for them to find, and how you could leave a message for the future, and what form that would take, because most of the things we think of as being like forms of communication, like books or memory sticks or DVDs, they're not going to survive very long at all. The things more likely to survive are like paintings on the inside of caves, or the tube tunnels deep under London. They're going to be around for a while. So I brought my characters into like those kind of big concepts on like a personal level of how can we go about making a difference in this world, and yeah, that started it from there and tried to make it seem like an interesting thing that isn't really scary or unlikely to happen.
Thank you. I'm always really intrigued by how really common things are less likely to be preserved because people just throw them out. It's like old leaflets and brochures and things.
Yeah, so Coca-Cola is probably likely to be seen as like the religion of our time because so much stuff has got the Coca-Cola logo on.
All right, I'm just going to quickly say hi to people in the chat as well who've just arrived. We have someone watching from Brazil, from Leicester, and from Chelmsford. Hi, everyone. You can leave questions for all the authors in the chat as well. We'll be looking at that. So yeah, quick hi to everyone there. I'm going to go to some individual questions now. So Malorie, I'm going to start with you. And you said that Crossfire was partly inspired by the current political landscape. Were you always planning on returning to the series, or was it really like you had one big moment where you thought, okay, I have to go back?
Oh, it was the latter. Because after Double Cross, I kind of thought, well, that's it. And I thought I finished after Checkmate, and then Toby, one of the characters, started whispering in my ear, and so then Double Cross was born, and I thought I had finished, and then we had Trump, and we had Brexit and so forth, and then Toby started whispering in my ear again, but he was an adult and very ambitious and wanted to be Prime Minister and so on, and then a very close friend of his is murdered and he's accused of it and so forth. So Callie Rose then has to defend him. And so it was kind of like, it was him whispering in my ear and all these sort of characters. And I thought actually doing 3 generations of those characters within the series felt right. And so it was kind of inspired by current times, but I know that, well, I should never say never, but Endgame absolutely feels like it's going to be the last one for me of this series. But it was definitely inspired by political events. And it's one of those things I wouldn't just write it for the sake of it. I would only write it if I felt inspired and I felt the characters had more to say. And so that's how it came about.
And it must have been so interesting sort of writing this over the years as the world changes and sort of keeping up with that as well.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's why Double Cross was born, because it was kind of, when we first had the sort of spate of knife crimes going on, and it's sort of like Toby joining a gang to keep safe. But it's much easier to get into these things than to get out of them. And it's a sort of blood in, blood out kind of philosophy of, you know, you when you join, it's you to leave is painful, and as he finds. And then so I kind of, that was inspired by current events, and this one's been inspired by current events. So, but as I said, Endgame will be the last one, because it's kind of like 20 odd years of my life. So enough.
All right, next question is for Jenny. And Jenny, the question for you is, why did you choose to focus specifically on a step-parent, stepchild relationship?
That's a really interesting question. I think it's because I wanted to look at, I started off writing about scapegoating. So I wanted to look at what is it that allows a group, and in my story, a family, to blame a single person for everything that goes wrong. And what's it like to be that person who is blamed? And because I never plan, I often don't make choices. Sometimes it feels like I make them afterwards. So a bit like Malorie was saying about having, you know, making sure you don't have excess material. I literally have to get a machete out at the end. So it feels, I wanted to have somebody who felt like they were other within a family. And so Lexi was othered in the sense that she doesn't feel like she fits. But I thought, well, that would always have been the case. It has to be either some circumstance has changed within the family, or you've always been scapegoated. And I thought, what would it be like if you had a life that you remembered before, a life where you weren't that person, that you weren't blamed for everything, that things were better? That might help you on the journey to thinking, is it me? Because it didn't used to be me. So why is it me now? What's different in my life? And so I had to have something change. And so I introduced new elements to the family, which was the mum gets a boyfriend, and then they have a child together, which is the half sister, and then he has a son from a different relationship. So there's quite a few new faces in what was a very small family, which was Lexi and her mum. They were a very close-knit unit, very loving, and I wanted to sort of do something that would just put something in the way that Lexi would miss. And she looks back and thinks, it feels like a fairy tale, this childhood I had when I was very little, but maybe I'm misremembering. Maybe it's always been like this. So it just gave me more room for maneuver.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you. My next question is for Juno. And it's all about the research that you did, because there was so much research for this book. And did you find anything that you were really surprised by? And did you find anything that you kind of wish you could have included in the book, but it didn't quite fit?
Yeah, I mean, on the second point first, like Malorie said, there was a lot of stuff I had to ditch. There was a whole, if you've read the book, there was this whole bit where they went off to Bangladesh, and Yana was horrified to learn that she'd modelled for a brand whose clothes were made in sweatshops. And there was this very different ending in Bangladesh. But again, and so I spent all these weeks researching sweatshop conditions and the Rana Plaza disaster, and just none of it's in the book, because I realised, again, it's not Yana's story, and nor was this a non-fiction book about the horrors of the fashion industry. I wish I could say I was surprised at the things I learned. For this one, I had to do a lot of work. I had to, and I won't lie, you know, when I started writing this book, I was really excited because I thought this was my way in to a world that I thought was like really glamorous and really kind of sort of rarefied. And so I sat down with models and photographers and agents and fashion designers, and it was all very nice. But the stereotypes that we know about the fashion industry, a lot of them are true. I think the industry is aware of its problems. It has taken steps to improve things in terms of, again, looking at the one issue of the book, which was how the models are treated. I think there have been little positive steps in the right direction. But I think what maybe, if there was a surprise, it was when I was speaking to the girls, and actually some boys as well, how they had, I suppose the word is gaslit. They'd been gaslit into expecting abuse as a part of their jobs. Like, you know, why wouldn't a hairdresser burn my face with curling irons? Why wouldn't I have to sit naked in a warehouse for 7 hours freezing to death? You know, why wouldn't someone tell me I have to starve myself? You know, and there was this sort of slight gallows humor from the models of, this is what it's like to be a model. And I was like, what if there was a way that, you know, it didn't have to be like that? What if you could eat solids? Just a crazy idea, kind of. And so that was, yeah, it was, I wasn't surprised, but it was disheartening.
I'll mute myself there. Thank you. Lauren, my question for you is all about one of the big questions in the book, which is, what does it mean to be human? What are you kind of hoping that people reading the book will pick up on that topic?
Yeah, so the way I was thinking about this was like, if we did go extinct right now, at this point in human society, at where we are with technology, we probably wouldn't just accept the fact that we couldn't have babies anymore. We'd try and do something about it. And so in the book, they invent an app called Baby Grow, where everyone can have like a baby growing on their phone for 9 months, and then it gets born on the app, and you can play with it like you have to raise it like a Tamagotchi. And I thought that if that started to happen and we really invested so many people's time into that, then that kind of Tamagotchi might start to develop even more as people put their characteristics into it, and it maybe came out of the app and became having a little robot body, and the idea is that things could develop from there. So I was really thinking about like, what makes us human, and it's not the fact that we look like this and we have like symmetry across our body, so we have two hands that match, which is kind of what makes our brains human. It's the fact that we like have these connections with other humans, we have compassion, we are creative in terms of creating art, and we are scientific, and all of those things can be programmed, and we're making early attempts at making AIs that like they absorb a lot of human output and try and generate their own. And if we as a society were really invested in that, we could make these AIs become very human. And so for me, the message was that everything that is human is about what we can pass on and teach our descendants, and you don't have to have a descendant that is biological to do that. And we put so much love into like our pets, and like if you have a Roomba, it's very hard to not see that as a little creature and love that. And I think that we're such a loving species that is really what makes us human, the fact that we have the ability to love whoever or whatever being is in our lives. And I wanted to show that in the story as time goes on, and show how, yeah, parenting can create things beyond what we expect of when we think of having a child.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, we're going to go to some quick fire questions now for everyone. And I'd love everyone in the chat to answer this as well if they could. So short answers for this one. So first question is, hold on, I have a bunch of them here. Which book do you wish your teenage self could have read? So maybe if there's people who are teenagers in the chat as well, maybe you could, go back a little bit to when you were even younger. But yeah, so is there any book, whether it's from the shortlist or another book that you've kind of read maybe more recently that you wish you would have read when you were a teen? And Juno, I'm going to go to you first.
Slightly obscure choice. It's an Australian YA novel by an author called Alyssa Brugman, and it's called Alex as well.
Malorie?
Oh, off the top of my head, I mean, there's a number of them, but off the top of my head, I think the one that I found did alter the course of my life would be Melvin Burgess's Junk. And I love that book so much. And I wish I'd read that as a teen, because I think I would have been a writer sooner. I would have written for YA sooner. That was the book that got me writing YA books. And I thought it was an amazing piece of work. So I'd have to say Junk.
Jenny?
I would say Alexi Sherman's Absolutely True Story of a Part-Time Indian, just because it's great and it did lots of things to me when I read it.
And finally, Lauren?
So when I was a teenager, I was reading the Noughts and Crosses books. I remember like exchanging my World Book Day token for the stories and stuff. So I feel like I already grew up with those. So my answer is We Have Always Lived in the Castle by Shirley Jackson, because when I read that, it just blew my mind. It does so many amazing things with narrative and unreliable narration and plot twists. And it just taught me a lot about storytelling. Even though it was published in the 1950s, it's still so fresh and new and immediately captures your attention. So yeah,
great answers. The next question was one we did yesterday as well, and it was really fun, so I'm going to do it again. And it was sent in by Kerry McKay on Twitter, and it is, if your writing style could be summed up as the personality of a famous rock star, pop star, or celebrity, who would it be? And I'm going to go with, who wants to go first? Raise your hand if you want to go first. Lauren.
Cher's tweets are like my writing style. My first drafts are just like her tweets. They're completely insane and nonsensical. So yeah, Cher.
Perfect. All right, Juno, how about you?
I'm going to go with the lead singer of Garbage, Shirley Manson, who is never scared to speak truth to power and is Scottish and fabulous, and as fabulous at 50 as she was at 25.
Great answer as well. All right, Malorie, how about you?
Gosh, it would be an amalgam of I think Marvin Gaye and David Bowie. I think I just love trying to do different things and different styles and tell different kinds of stories in different genres. And I think I love and just trying to be honest with it. I think the Marvin Gaye thing would be trying to be honest with what I was trying to do, and the David Bowie thing of trying to kind of reinvent what I'm trying to do with different books and so on. So that's what I pick.
Right, good combo. And Jenny?
I don't know if this is true of my writing style, but certainly for the last book, I choose Joan Jett from The Runaways, just because she was furious and brave.
It's a good choice. Okay, so we have two more quickfire questions. The next one is by someone I asked on Twitter how to pronounce her name, but I still don't know. I'm going to say Ione. And she said, what was the first book that you remember making you cry? And she said it was Hetty Feather by Jacqueline Wilson. So who wants to go first? Yeah, Juno.
I can remember really clearly, it was the end of Matilda by Roald Dahl, where she ends up with Miss Honey, spoiler, and I cried happy tears.
Oh, that's sweet. All right, Lauren, let's go to you next.
So I don't cry very often at books. I cry a lot at films, but books have to work really hard to make me cry. But every time I read this, I cry again. And it's The Time Traveler's Wife by Audrey Niffenegger. Like, the ending of that just slays me every time. I don't know what it is about it. It's just, yeah, it's really good and very sci-fi, and yeah, it's exactly my thing.
I've cried many tears over that book. Malorie.
I'm like Lauren. I don't tend to cry at books. I do cry at films. But one book that did move me to tears was Goodnight, Mr. Tom. And I read the end of that when he says, "So look at me, Dad," when he's on his bicycle, and oh, the tears flowed. The tears flowed. So it'd be that one by Misha Magorian.
Yeah, and Jenny?
Well, I had a collection of poetry called The Swinging Rainbow. And there was a kind of a sister book to it called Come Follow Me. And I was given them when I was about 6 or 7. And I used to read these poems out loud. And I'm sure it's just something to do with awful sentiment, but I used to be able to make myself cry by performing these poems, because I think it was the first time I realized that words, because a lot of the poems are really short, and by different authors, obviously, I realized that words could move you in completely different ways, just this sort of different selection on a page, and that when you said them aloud to other people, they would be moved in a completely different way from you. So it was the poetry collection.
The next question is a quick fire one, so I'm asking for short answers because I feel like it's also a question that you could answer in a really, really long way, because it's a difficult one, I think. And it's from the chat, and it's from Megan, and she asked, is there something major in your book that, looking back, you would change? Jenny, I'm going to go to you first.
I don't think there is.
Because
because
very short answer.
no, there isn't, because lots of the things that get brought up, and I know you want a short answer, I can defend. Like, people go, oh, why did you do that? And I was really angry that happened, but I know why I did it, and I'm glad it's there. So no. Yeah,
makes sense. All right, Juno?
Not this one, no. That's not always been true of all of my books, but with Meat Market, when we finished it, I was happy with it.
Okay,
and the TV show will give us a chance to fix anything anyway. So,
Malorie?
No, actually, because what's in there is what I wanted to put in there. So, and if I wanted to change anything, I would have changed it before it's published. So, no.
Great, and Lauren?
I feel like I'm getting better as a writer so much with each book that I write, that if I went back, I would write them all completely differently anyway. So the more I write, the more I would want to change about them. So I don't let myself think about it, because it would be like opening the floodgates and I'd be replotting them from scratch, and it would be not the same book at all. I like to think of them as like little time capsules of who I was at that moment in time and what I was interested in. Like, my first book, The Next Together, I started writing when I was 16, so I could never change that, because that's what 16-year-old me wanted to write about. So the only things that I want to change are in the ones that is still a Word document on my computer that I can actively go back and adjust.
Right, so we're not making any changes to books that are already here, only future ones. The next question is from Karis, who is also in the chat. And she said, because all of the issues in these books are so important and big, did you ever feel scared that you'd be representing them in the wrong way or be leaving things out? And especially, I think the representing in the wrong way is quite an interesting question. And then I'm going to add a question to that, and that is, if you've been writing about the same topic or same themes over the years, do you feel like you've changed your approach in how you write about them? And I'm going to go to Malorie for that one first.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, it's a double question.
A really interesting question. I think the approach has to change as you change, and and if especially when I've been doing this a while, and so I'm not the same person as I was 20 years ago. I'm not the same person as I was last year. So your approach to these things does change. I think as far as the story is concerned, then you can only write as you are, from the person you are. So all my characters, I'm trying to write fresh characters, etc., but I'm the one writing them. So I try and make sure they are distinct characters, different from me, different from anybody else I've created. And I think that's part of my job as a writer. But it's one of these things where I would hope that the books I've written sort of 20 years ago are different, as Lauren was saying, you just hope that you improve with each book. And that's why I never ever go back, and I read them once they're published, and that's it, and I never read them again because I want to go back and change every line. So does that answer the question?
Yeah, it does. Yeah. Lauren, how about you?
So I think that one of the joys of writing is that you can just show one person's perspective on a topic, and you don't have to say this is the definitive point of view. You can just say this is this one character's thing, and it's not like you're giving your own thoughts as an author, you're giving that character's perspective. So in The Quiet at the End of the World, Malorie, the main character, is bisexual. She lives in a world where there's only one boy. The only person her age is a boy. So her bisexuality is like through the lens of the only potential love interest being a boy. And so I was very careful when I was writing that the way she experiences bisexuality is her experience, and it isn't saying anything about the topic. It's not like a message for everyone who's bisexual. It's just how her experience is, and that's all you can do as a writer, is write from the point of view of one person and hope that it reaches someone who like finds themselves relating to that character.
Right. Jenny?
It was really important to me that I didn't write something which was unrealistic in terms of the subject matter, because it was important that by the end of the book, it wasn't all clear, it wasn't all solved, that a 15-year-old girl actually isn't expected to save the day. Especially when she's surrounded by quite powerful adults. And I was under quite a lot of pressure, both from myself, but also from people who read the book, to make the ending a bit more, it's not that it's not uplifting, but a bit more like, she arrives on a horse and rescues everybody. And it felt really important to me that the real readers who have real lived experience of this could get something from the book that was something that they could really do in their lives. And that it wasn't saying, you are expected to be utterly heroic, that actually what you can do is change your individual circumstances. You can't save everybody. And so in terms of writing over the years about big subjects, I think for me, I've just got less afraid, because when I wrote my first book, I thought, oh, what are people going to say? People who really, really have lived this, they might all write to me and say, you've got it wrong. And I think it's really important, as Lauren said, to put it through the lens of a single person and say this is their experience of it, but at the same time to hold a responsibility for the fact that a reader who genuinely lives that life or some of those circumstances might read this, and for them to say this is nothing like it would be awful. So you obviously have to do it with respect and a great deal of research.
Yeah, thank you. And Juno?
Yeah, I really agree with what everyone else has said, and thinking about what Lauren said, sometimes I think people mistake our characters for us, and that's not always true. And obviously I write all the characters. I write the good ones, I write the bad ones, I write the ones who behave unmorally and amorally even. I'm a writer, I should get the right word. So I think that's a mistake to make, and I think it's a tricky one, because when you're writing for young adults, I feel a bit of a responsibility to sort of show the good in people and to show hope. In all of my novels, there is always an element of optimism or an element of hope, or that things can get better. And because I think, honestly, things always can get better. But what specifically with Yana's story, what I didn't want to do was make sex the enemy. That was really, really important to me. And I think sometimes in the past, YA has been a little bit guilty of making sex something terrible and scary that will kill you. See Twilight, for example. So I wanted to give her a lovely boyfriend. So as well as being sexually assaulted, Jana also has a fully consensual sexual relationship with her 17-year-old boyfriend, who is wicked. And if nothing else, I was able to show both the good and the bad of what a sexual relationship can be.
Thank you.
So not the answer to that question, but that's where it ended.
So I also want to look a little bit at the future with my questions. And so the first question about that is, are there any big topics, big issues that you might not have tackled yet, but that you might want to tackle in future books? Anything that's been playing on your mind? Lauren, I'm going to go to you first.
So I've really wanted to write a book about climate change basically since I first got a book deal, and I've never felt ready enough as an author to tackle such a big topic. And I've recently started writing one. It's like a climate change thriller, and it's very political, and there's a lot of like the oil industry in there, and it's a bit scary, and I've had to do a lot of research, but it's been really nice to finally look at that and be like, I think I could handle that now. So yeah, but it is scary when there's something that you are really passionate about that makes it almost harder to want to put down on the page in a way, because it's just so personal to you. And I think you just have to go for it, because if you hold it up as like the thing that you'll reach one day, you'll never get there. You only get that by the act of trying and getting better at writing through forcing yourself through the bad stuff.
And it's a topic that keeps changing as well. That must be hard as well.
Yeah, especially like right now when everyone's inside, the amount of carbon emissions have dropped very rapidly, which I could do a whole lecture on, so I'm not going to. But yeah, it's made a big difference, and it's hard to keep up with that when you're writing about something like climate change.
Right, Malorie?
I've had an idea for a while. I'd like to do something about parental abuse and the effect it has, and so I have the idea and I know what I want to say, but I'm very wary of saying it until I've written it, kind of thing. Because I always think,
fair
if
enough.
I talk about it, then I'm never going to write it, because I think, oh, I've told everybody, so what's the point?
It's done.
But I would like to kind of just explore that and the repercussions of that and what it does to the psyche of those who are kind of left behind. So I think that will be one that I do sooner rather than later.
Exciting. Juno?
I just got my glamorous assistant / fiance carrying my new book, Wonderland, which comes out tomorrow, everyone. No, it doesn't, Thursday. I don't know what day of the week it is. Days is the meaning. And I suppose, yeah, the next big issue that I tackled was class. And that's twice that's happened now. So I started writing Meat Market pre-Weinstein, and obviously the Weinstein scandal broke while I was in the middle of writing it. And then on the week that Wonderland comes out, which is basically a book about how there is one rule for the rich and one rule for the poor, it's like you just couldn't time it. So yeah, and that was really, really difficult to tell a story about everything that disgusts me about the class system in this country through the analogy of a teen retelling of Alice in Wonderland. So it's weird, it's really weird, but it was a challenge, and I think I should be challenging myself with each novel.
And Jenny?
Well, I'd never planned, so I don't ever think, oh, I know, I've got this really big issue I want to write about. So with Furious Thing, I didn't think I'm going to write about controlling and coercive behaviour. I started writing about a girl who was scapegoated. And so the book I've just begun, it appears to be, at the moment, have a bit of the issue of homelessness creeping into it. And that may or may not become one of the major themes, I don't know. So, I mean, it's always obviously living, well, not obviously, but I live in London, and there is an awful lot of homelessness that you encounter homeless people so many times every day. So possibly, yeah, possibly that.
Yeah, so a lot more big issues are going to be tackled in all these amazing future books. Okay, so last question for tonight is a question from Lauren Del Rio on Twitter, and she asked, what are you reading at the moment during lockdown? It can be reading. I'm also very interested to see, what are you watching? How are you keeping yourself entertained? Juno, I'm going to go to you first.
Okay, when I'm writing YA, and like Lauren, I have been trying to do some work with little success. I can't read YA because it starts to creep into my voice. So I've been reading, and this is what I do when I'm writing, I read very page-turnery, plotty thrillers, and I've just read one called The Chain by Adrian McGinty, I think. It's so good. It's so ridiculous. I love it. And what have I been watching? I have just finished the final season of Schitt's Creek, which I'm going to miss so much. It feels like I've lost a friend. I'm going to miss it.
How about you, Jenny?
I have been reading quite a lot of poetry because it feels like in these lockdown times you have many friends with you. It's definitely the book I would take on a desert island. I have a book called Staying Alive, which is a massive compilation of poems, and you can just open it, random page, and you have a new friend. So I've been dipping into poetry a lot. And I started watching How to Get Away with Murder because I love Viola Davis as an actor, and it's kind of ridiculous, but it's 5 seasons. I can be there. I'll get through lockdown on it. It's really fun. I mean, it's kind of operatic murder, but it's nothing like I'd normally watch. But yeah, she's so wonderful. I'd watch her in anything.
It's a good time to start a series that has a ton of seasons.
Yeah.
Lauren, how about you?
So at the minute I'm reading a lot of non-fiction about climate change, and I feel guilty when I'm not doing that. So I tend to read most fiction through audiobooks when I'm doing other stuff. So I'm just listening to The Flat Share and A Half-Baked Idea. And I'm very excited about this one behind me, The City We Became by N.K. Jemisin. That's next on my reading list. I love the 5th season. It does so many cool things with like the futuristic post-apocalyptic genre. And this one is about what it would be like if cities that became big enough became born and they became sentient. So I'm very excited for that.
Great. And Malorie?
I'm going to be honest, and this is going to make me sound very bizarre, but I have been binge watching The Walking Dead, which is about a virus that wipes out most people, and then when you die you come back as a zombie. But it's about basically the relationships of those who are left behind, and those who exploit that, and those who are trying to build up communities again. But I also, as I'm reading the compendiums to it, because some bits of the graphic novels are different to the series. So the series is 10 seasons, and I am on season 8, and I'm hoping that will take me through lockdown. And I'm just reading the compendiums as well. So that's my reading material at the moment. Lots of zombies.
You're totally immersed.
I'm not very good with horror films because, you know, with The Walking Dead, there's an awful lot of zombies being killed before they eat people. So at those bits, I just kind of turn my head, wait for the squishy noises to stop, and then carry on watching it. But I'm absolutely loving it, I have to say, which makes me sound very bizarre watching that in these times. But there you go, that's what I'm watching.
I get it. I really want to reread Station 11 at this time, so we'll see where we land. Okay, so that was officially the last question. Thank you so much for being here on this panel. I'm going to do some more housekeeping before we leave, but I would like to encourage the chat to say thanks to our lovely authors on the panel today. We also have a prize to announce because we were asking people to send in questions. And the person who has won a full set of the shortlist, which is an incredible prize, is Sheridan18, who's called Megs. So we'll be contacting them. Congratulations. Then we also have another panel tomorrow, which is on the topic of YA Reimagined. So don't forget to tune into that as well at 5 p.m. And then, of course, on Thursday, there will be the big announcement on the YA Book Prize Twitter. So definitely tune in for that. You can watch this panel back if you missed some of it on the Bookseller YouTube channel, and it'll be tweeted and shared on Instagram as well. There's also extracts from all the shortlisted books on the YA Book Prize website. So if you want to do some reading, you can do that. And that is everything for me. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. Thank you to the lovely panel.
Thank you for some amazing questions.
Thank you. And we'll wave goodbye and then go offline. All right. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.